My name is Sophia, and I am 28 years old. When I was 15, my parents shipped me off to my grandparents' remote farm in Montana so my younger sister could have the spotlight. They told everyone I was having behavioral issues and needed structure. What they did not tell anyone was that they were systematically erasing me from the family to make room for their precious golden child. 13 years later, I discovered the real reason they abandoned me, and it changed everything I thought I knew about loyalty, blood, and revenge. But before we dive into how I brought down their perfect little empire, I need to know, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your location in the comments, because this story gets wild, and I want to know how far this tale of family vengeance travels. If you have ever felt like the forgotten child or wondered what happens when the black sheep finally bites back, smash that like button and subscribe because you're about to witness the most satisfying family takedown you have ever seen. The call came on a Tuesday evening while I was reviewing quarterly reports for my marketing firm in Seattle. My grandmother's voice cracked through the phone, fragile and desperate in a way I had never heard before. "Sophia, honey, I need you to come home. Your grandfather, he is in the hospital, and there are important things I need to tell you before it is too late." I had not been back to the farm since I left for college at 18. My parents made it clear that holidays were reserved for immediate family, which apparently did not include me once I was conveniently tucked away in Montana. My sister Madison got the Christmas mornings, birthday celebrations, and family vacations to Europe. I got monthly phone calls that felt more like welfare checks and a card on my birthday that arrived 3 days late every year. The farm looked smaller than I remembered, weathered by years of neglect that my grandparents could no longer handle alone. Grandma Eleanor met me at the door, her usually perfect silver hair disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion, and something that looked like guilt. "He is stable now," she said, gripping my hands with surprising strength. "But Sophia, we need to talk. There are things about your parents, about why they really sent you here, that you deserve to know." We sat in the same kitchen where I had learned to bake bread and can vegetables, where my grandmother had taught me that hard work and integrity mattered more than appearances. She pulled out a worn shoebox from beneath the sink, her hands trembling as she opened it. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to me, in handwriting I recognized as my parents, my sisters, even some friends from high school. None of them had ever reached me. "They have been sending these for years," Grandma Eleanor whispered. "Your parents demanded that I intercept all mail addressed to you. They said it was for your own good, that you needed to focus on your future here and not be distracted by your old life." My hands shook as I opened the first letter, dated just 2 months after I arrived at the farm. It was from my best friend Jessica, wondering why I had stopped responding to her texts and calls. She wrote about missing me, about how Madison had told everyone at school that I had become troubled and needed to be fixed somewhere far away. Another letter, this one from my parents, was addressed to me but clearly intended for my grandparents' eyes. In it, they detailed their relief at having me handled and expressed gratitude that they could now focus on Madison's opportunities without the complications I brought to the family dynamic. But it was the final letter that shattered everything I thought I knew about my exile. Written by my father to my grandfather just 6 months ago, it outlined their plan to sell the family farm once my grandparents passed away. The letter casually mentioned how they had been preparing Madison to inherit everything, including the farm that had been in our family for 4 generations. "They told us you were a bad influence on Madison," my grandmother said, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "They said you were jealous, manipulative, that keeping you around would ruin her chances at getting into good colleges. They convinced us that sending you here was protecting both of you." The cruelest part was learning that my parents had been telling extended family and old friends that I had chosen to live with my grandparents, that I preferred the simple farm life to being part of their ambitious family. They had rewritten history, painting themselves as supportive parents who respected their difficult daughter's choices. "But Sophia," my grandmother continued, "there is more. Your parents have been using your name on legal documents. When your great-aunt died last year and left money to you and Madison equally, they diverted your portion into an account they control. They told the lawyers you were unreachable and that they were managing your affairs. I felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. Not anger, not hurt, but a crystalline clarity that cut through years of confusion and self-doubt. My parents had not just abandoned me. They had systematically stolen from me, isolated me, and built their perfect family narrative on the foundation of my erasure. How much money are we talking about? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. $47,000 from your great-aunt. But there was also the settlement from the car accident when you were 16. The other driver's insurance paid out, but your parents said you were too young and unstable to handle that kind of money responsibly. My mind reeled. I remembered the accident clearly. A drunk driver had hit me while I was walking to the school bus stop. I had spent 3 weeks in the hospital with a broken leg and concussion. My parents had visited twice, both times seeming more concerned about the inconvenience to their schedule than my recovery. Sophia, that settlement was for $85,000. I set the letters down carefully, my hands steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. Over $130,000. Money that could have paid for my entire college education, that could have given me choices and security. Instead, I had worked 3 jobs through college, graduated with crushing debt, and spent years clawing my way up from nothing. Grandma, I said quietly, I need you to tell me everything. Every conversation, every lie they told you, every document they made you sign. And I need you to help me gather evidence. She nodded, her eyes fierce with the same determination I was feeling. I have been keeping records, honey. Every letter, every phone call, every time they asked me to sign something. I may be old, but I am not stupid. Something about their story never felt right. That night, I called in sick to work and began building my case. I photographed every letter, every document my grandmother had saved. I contacted the law firm that had handled my great-aunt's estate and the insurance company that had settled my accident claim. What I discovered made my parents' betrayal even worse than I had imagined. They had not just stolen my inheritance, they had been claiming me as a dependent on their taxes for years, despite providing no financial support. They had used my social security number to open credit cards that they paid off just enough to build my credit, but never told me about. Most shocking of all, they had taken out a life insurance policy on me, with themselves as beneficiaries, when I turned 18. The drive back to Seattle gave me 8 hours to transform my rage into something far more dangerous, a plan. My phone buzzed constantly with work calls I ignored and text messages I deleted without reading. Nothing in my regular life mattered anymore. Everything that I thought I knew about my identity, my family, my place in the world had been built on lies so elaborate that I marveled at the effort my parents had put into maintaining them. I spent the next 2 weeks conducting what I privately called my investigation phase. Years of building marketing campaigns had taught me how to research thoroughly, how to find weaknesses in competing narratives, and how to craft messages that hit their targets with surgical precision. I was about to use every one of those skills against the people who gave birth to me. First, I hired a private investigator named Madison, a former police detective who specialized in financial crimes and family fraud. Within a week, he had uncovered a paper trail that revealed the true scope of my parents' deception. The stolen inheritance money had been used as a down payment on a luxury condo in Miami that Madison was currently living in rent-free while attending graduate school. The insurance settlement had paid for Madison's undergraduate education at a private college that cost $60,000 per year. But Marcus found something even more damaging. My parents had been running a small-scale tax fraud scheme for years, claiming dependents they did not support and deducting business expenses for Madison's education by funneling money through a fake consulting company. They had stolen from me to fund Madison's lifestyle, then stolen from the government to cover their tracks. Your parents are not just bad people, Marcus told me during our final meeting. They are criminals. The IRS would be very interested in seeing these documents. I smiled, feeling a satisfaction I had not experienced in years. Not yet. I want to handle this my way first. Next, I reached out to every family member, family friend, and community connection I could remember from my childhood. Social media made this easier than I had expected. I started slowly, innocently, just reconnecting with people I had lost touch with after moving to Montana. The conversations followed a predictable pattern. Surprise at hearing from me, awkward questions about why I had chosen to leave, and then genuine confusion when I gently corrected their understanding of what had actually happened. My father's sister, Aunt Rachel, was particularly enlightening. Over a long phone conversation, she admitted that she had always found my parents' story strange. "You were such a sweet, responsible kid," she said. "When they said you were having behavioral problems, I kept waiting for examples, but they were always vague. And then when you supposedly decided to live on the farm permanently, it just did not sound like you." I learned that my parents had been telling different versions of my story to different people, depending on what made them look best in each situation. To some relatives, I was a troubled teen who needed structure. To others, I was a free spirit who preferred country life. To Madison's friends and teachers, I was the difficult older sister who had been sent away so I would not be a bad influence. The most revealing conversation was with Mrs. Henderson, my high school guidance counselor, who remembered me as one of her most promising students. "Your parents came to see me after you left," she told me. "They wanted me to change your academic records to reflect poor behavior and failing grades. When I refused, they became very aggressive. They said something about needing documentation to support their decision to send you away." This was the piece I had been waiting for, evidence that my parents had not just rewritten history, but had actively tried to falsify official records to support their lies. I also discovered that Madison had no idea about the stolen money. Through careful social media stalking and some strategic messaging through mutual acquaintances, I learned that my parents had told her the condo and college tuition were gifts from our great-aunt's estate. Madison believed she had simply been fortunate, not that her fortune had been built on theft from her sister. This created an interesting moral dilemma. Madison was benefiting from crimes committed against me, but she was also a victim of our parents' manipulation. They had poisoned her understanding of our relationship from the time she was 12 years old, feeding her stories about my jealousy and destructiveness that justified my absence from family events and holidays. I decided that Madison deserved to know the truth, but only after I had dealt with our parents. She was going to have to face some difficult realities about the people who raised her, and I wanted to make sure she could not warn them about what was coming. The final piece of my preparation involved securing my own future. I knew that confronting my parents would likely result in permanent estrangement from most of my extended family. The people who had chosen to believe their lies for 13 years might not be ready to accept the truth, especially if it meant acknowledging their own complicity in my isolation. So I began building what I privately called my chosen family. I reached out to old friends who remembered me before my exile, cultivating relationships with people who knew my character independently of my parents' narrative. I also strengthened my professional network, making sure that my career and financial stability were completely independent of any family connections. Most importantly, I documented everything. Every conversation, every piece of evidence, every revelation was carefully recorded and backed up in multiple locations. I was not just planning confrontation, I was building a legal case that could withstand scrutiny in court if necessary. By the end of the month, I had a complete picture of my parents' crimes and a detailed plan for exposing them. The beauty of my strategy was its simplicity. I was going to tell the truth. Not angrily, not defensively, but clearly and comprehensively, with evidence to support every claim. I was going to return to my family's life the same way I had been removed from it. Suddenly and without warning. But this time, I would be the one controlling the narrative. The timing had to be perfect. Madison's graduate school graduation was scheduled for May 15th, and I knew my parents would be orchestrating a celebration designed to showcase their success as parents. They had spent years crafting an image of themselves as devoted family people who had overcome the challenge of one difficult child to raise another who was thriving. This event would be their victory lap, their public vindication of all the choices they had made. I planned to crash their party. But first, I needed allies, and I needed them positioned strategically. My private investigator Marcus had connected me with Amanda Rivera, a family law attorney who specialized in inheritance fraud and financial abuse. Amanda was a small woman with steel in her eyes who listened to my story with the focused intensity of someone who had seen every possible variation of family betrayal. This is one of the most comprehensive cases of systematic family abuse I have encountered, she told me after reviewing all the evidence. Your parents did not just steal from you, they committed identity theft, tax fraud, and what we call financial elder abuse by manipulating your grandparents into participating in your isolation. Amanda helped me understand my legal options, but more importantly, she helped me understand how to document my case in a way that would be bulletproof if my parents tried to retaliate or claim I was lying. We filed preliminary paperwork to freeze the accounts where my stolen money was being held and began the process of reclaiming my financial identity. The next ally I cultivated was completely unexpected: Madison's boyfriend, David. I had discovered through social media that he was a journalism student at Columbia, someone who valued truth and investigation. More importantly, he had been dating Madison for 2 years and had apparently asked my parents several times about their other daughter, who lived somewhere in Montana. I reached out to David through a carefully crafted message that positioned me as someone trying to reconnect with family after years of misunderstandings. I suggested meeting for coffee when he and Madison came to Seattle for a weekend trip, framing it as a surprise I was planning for my sister. David turned out to be exactly what I had hoped: intelligent, ethical, and deeply uncomfortable with the vague answers he had been getting about me. Madison talks about you sometimes, he told me over coffee in a small cafe near Pike Place Market. But whenever I ask specific questions about why you two are not closer, she gets defensive and says it is complicated. Your parents changed the subject entirely. I showed him some of the letters my grandmother had hidden, particularly the ones that revealed my parents' relief at having me handled, and their concerns about my being a bad influence on Madison. I watched his expression shift from confusion to disgust as he realized the implications. Madison has no idea about any of this, he said finally. She genuinely believes you chose to live on the farm because you preferred it there. She thinks your parents were being supportive of your choices. This confirmed what I had suspected, but it also created an opportunity. David was horrified by what he was learning, and he wanted to help. As a journalism student, he understood the importance of evidence and documentation. More critically, he loved Madison enough to want her to know the truth about the people who raised her, even if that truth was painful. She deserves to know, he said. But this is going to destroy her understanding of everything she believes about her family. David agreed to help me document the truth, but only if I promised to approach Madison with compassion. She is not responsible for what your parents did, he reminded me. She was a child when this started, just like you were. This was a fair point, and it helped me refine my approach. My revenge was not against Madison, it was against our parents. Madison was collateral damage who deserved a chance to make her own choices once she knew the truth. My third ally came from an unexpected source: my father's business partner, Robert Kim. I had remembered him as a kind man who had always treated me warmly during the brief periods when I was allowed at company events. Robert owned a successful accounting firm with my father, and I suspected he might have insights into the financial irregularities I had discovered. I approached Robert carefully, framing my inquiry as preparation for potential legal action against my parents. What I discovered was that Robert had been growing increasingly uncomfortable with some of my father's business practices, particularly the creative tax strategies and the mysterious consulting payments to Madison's education fund. I have been keeping my own records, Robert admitted during a private lunch meeting. Your father has been using company resources for personal expenses and claiming them as business deductions. I was planning to address this during our annual partnership review, but if you are gathering evidence for legal action, you should know that there are federal tax implications. Robert provided me with copies of financial documents that showed the full extent of my parents' fraudulent activities. They had been stealing not just from me, but from their business, their clients, and the government. The pattern of deception was so extensive that I realized my exile was probably just one piece of a much larger criminal enterprise. But Robert gave me something even more valuable than evidence. He gave me legitimacy. As my father's business partner, his willingness to testify about financial irregularities meant that my accusations could not be dismissed as the bitter complaints of an estranged daughter. With my legal team in place, my evidence documented, and my allies positioned, I began planning the actual confrontation. I wanted it to be public enough that my parents could not deny or minimize what had happened, but private enough that Madison would not be humiliated in front of strangers. I decided on Madison's graduation dinner, which my parents were hosting at an upscale restaurant for close family and friends. About 20 people would be present: grandparents, aunts and uncles, family friends, and Madison's college roommates. It was the perfect audience of people who had believed my parents' lies and who deserved to hear the truth. Getting myself invited required some strategic manipulation. I reached out to my Aunt Rachel, who had always expressed regret about losing touch with me. I told her I wanted to surprise Madison for her graduation and asked if she could convince my parents to include me in the celebration. I know things have been complicated, I said, but I want to try to repair our relationship. I have been doing a lot of growing up on the farm. Aunt Rachel was thrilled at the prospect of family reconciliation. She pressured my parents into extending an invitation, framing it as an opportunity for them to demonstrate their maturity and forgiveness. My parents, trapped by their own public image as caring parents, could not refuse without seeming petty and vindictive. The invitation came through Aunt Rachel, with a message from my mother expressing hope that we could put the past behind us and focus on Madison's achievements. The hypocrisy was breathtaking, but it was also exactly what I needed. I had 3 weeks to finalize my preparations. Marcus completed his investigation and provided me with a comprehensive report that documented every crime my parents had committed against me. Amanda prepared legal documents that I could serve immediately after the confrontation, ensuring that my parents could not hide or transfer assets before the courts intervened. Most importantly, I prepared emotionally for what was going to be one of the most difficult evenings of my life. I was about to destroy the carefully constructed narrative that my entire extended family had believed for 13 years. Some of them would support me once they learned the truth. Others might choose to maintain their relationships with my parents rather than face the uncomfortable reality of their own complicity. But I was ready. For the first time since I was 15 years old, I felt like I had power. Not just the power to hurt the people who had hurt me, but the power to tell my own story and reclaim my own identity. The restaurant was exactly what I had expected: understated elegance designed to impress without appearing ostentatious. My parents had chosen a private dining room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, the kind of venue that whispered success and sophistication. 23 people had gathered to celebrate Madison's achievement, and I recognized most of them from my childhood before everything changed. I arrived precisely 30 minutes after the scheduled start time, knowing that everyone would be settled with drinks and appetizers, relaxed and unsuspecting. I had chosen my outfit carefully: a simple black dress that was professional but not intimidating, paired with the pearl necklace my grandmother had given me for my 18th birthday. I wanted to look like someone who had thrived despite abandonment, not someone seeking revenge. The reaction when I walked into the room was everything I had anticipated. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. My mother's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. My father's practiced smile flickered like a broken light bulb. But it was Madison's face that almost made me falter: pure, uncomplicated joy at seeing her sister unexpectedly. "Sophia." Madison rushed toward me, her graduation dress sparkling under the restaurant's chandelier. "I cannot believe you're here." Mom and Dad said you might not be able to make it because of work. I hugged her tightly, inhaling the expensive perfume that my stolen money had probably purchased, feeling the weight of everything she was about to learn. I would not have missed this for anything. Mad congratulations on your master's degree. I am so proud of you. The next few minutes passed in a blur of awkward reintroductions and stilted conversations. Relatives who had not seen me in years struggled to reconcile the confident, successful woman standing before them with the troubled teenager they remembered from family mythology. I watched my parents scrambling to maintain control of a narrative that was already slipping through their fingers. Sophia has been living on the farm with Mom and Dad, my father announced to the room, his voice carrying just a hint of desperation. She has really found herself there, learned the value of hard work and simple living. I smiled serenely. Actually, I have been living in Seattle for the past 10 years. I run my own marketing firm downtown. But you are right about learning the value of hard work, Dad. Grandma and Grandpa taught me that honesty and integrity are the most important things a person can have. The room grew quiet. I could feel David watching me intently from across the table, ready to support Madison when everything collapsed. My Aunt Rachel looked confused, glancing between my parents and me as if trying to solve a puzzle. Well, my mother interjected with forced brightness, we are all here to celebrate Madison tonight. Perhaps we should order dinner and save the catching up for later. Actually, Mom, I think now is the perfect time for catching up. After all, we have 13 years of honesty to catch up on. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila envelope, placing it gently on the table next to Madison's graduation flowers. I have something I need to share with everyone, particularly with Madison. It is about why I really left home and what has been happening with our family finances. My father's face had gone completely white. Sophia, this is neither the time nor the place for whatever grievances you think you have. Grievances? I kept my voice level, conversational. Is that what we are calling theft now? Identity fraud? Tax evasion? Because I have documentation for all of it. The silence in the room was deafening. I could see my mother calculating, trying to determine how much I actually knew versus how much I was guessing. But I was done with guessing. Madison, honey, I need you to know that the condo you have been living in, the one Mom and Dad told you was a gift from Great Aunt Helen, it was purchased with money that was left to me in her will. $47,000 that our parents diverted into their own accounts. Madison's fork clattered against her plate. That is not possible. Mom showed me the will. It left everything to both of us equally. It did. But Mom and Dad told the lawyers I was unreachable and mentally unstable, so they were managing my portion. Except they never managed it for me. They used it for you. I opened the envelope and began distributing copies of documents, bank statements, legal correspondence, insurance settlements, tax records. The money that paid for your college tuition? That came from the insurance settlement when I was hit by a drunk driver at 16. $85,000 that was supposed to help me build my adult life. The room erupted in confused murmurs. My Aunt Rachel was studying the bank statements with growing horror. Uncle Mike was asking my father direct questions that were being met with stammering non-answers. But it was my grandfather's voice that cut through the chaos. Thomas, what is this about business deductions for educational expenses? You told me those were legitimate consulting fees. My father's business partner Robert stood up slowly. I think I can clarify that, Mr. Wilson. Thomas has been funneling money through a fake consulting company to avoid paying taxes on what were actually personal expenses for Madison's education. I have been documenting these irregularities for months. The beautiful thing about the truth is that once it starts coming out, it becomes impossible to stop. Robert's testimony opened the floodgates. Other family members began sharing their own doubts and suspicions about my parents' stories. The narrative that had protected my parents for 13 years crumbled in real time. But it was Madison's reaction that mattered most to me. She sat frozen, staring at the documents spread across the table, her face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. When she finally looked up at our parents, her voice was barely a whisper. Is this true? Did you steal from Sophia to pay for my life? My mother tried to reach for Madison's hand. Sweetheart, it is more complicated than that. We were protecting both of you. Sophia was going through a difficult phase, and we thought. You thought what? Madison's voice was getting stronger, angrier. You thought it was okay to steal from her? To lie to me about where my opportunities were coming from? To let me believe I was successful on my own merit when actually I was succeeding with stolen money. Madison, please, my father pleaded. We can explain everything. We made some mistakes, but we were trying to do what was best for the family. The best for the family would have been not committing federal crimes. Madison stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. The best for the family would have been not systematically destroying your older daughter's life to benefit your younger one. I watched my sister's world collapse and felt an unexpected mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. This was what I had wanted, for Madison to understand the true cost of her golden childhood. But seeing her pain reminded me that my parents had victimized both of us, just in different ways. David moved to support Madison as she began to cry, his arm around her shoulders as she processed the magnitude of what she had learned. Other family members were demanding explanations, threatening to involve authorities, expressing shock and disgust at the scope of the deception. In the midst of the chaos, I stood up and faced my parents directly for the first time in 13 years. I want every penny back with interest. I want public acknowledgement of what you did to me. And I want you to understand that your relationship with both of your daughters is over unless you are prepared to make this right. My mother was crying now, her perfect makeup streaking down her cheeks. Sophia, we love you. We made mistakes, but we love both of you. No, I said firmly. Love does not systematically destroy someone's life for 13 years. Love does not steal and lie and manipulate. What you did to me was not love. It was criminal. The restaurant manager appeared at our private dining room door, clearly concerned about the raised voices and emotional outbursts disrupting their upscale atmosphere. My father tried to wave him away, but the damage was already done. Other diners were craning their necks to see what was happening in the room where a family celebration had devolved into accusations of criminal behavior. Madison had stopped crying but remained pale and shaken, clinging to David's hand while staring at our parents as if seeing them for the first time. The documents I had distributed were being passed around the table, each relative discovering new layers of deception as they read through bank statements and legal correspondence. My Aunt Rachel was the first to break the horrified silence. Thomas, Helen, how could you do this to your own child? We trusted you when you said Sophia was having problems. We believed you when you said she wanted to live on the farm. We have been complicit in isolating this girl for over a decade based on your lies. It was not supposed to be permanent, my mother said desperately. We thought if we could just give Madison a few years to establish herself, then we could bring Sophia back into the family. But she seemed to be thriving on the farm, and Madison was doing so well. Thriving? I kept my voice calm despite the rage building in my chest. I worked 3 jobs through college because you stole my education fund. I graduated with crushing debt because you diverted my inheritance. I spent my entire adult life believing I was unwanted and forgettable because you systematically erased me from family events and conversations. That is not thriving, Mom. That is surviving despite everything you did to sabotage me. My grandfather, who had been quietly studying the tax documents Robert provided, looked up with the kind of cold fury I had never seen from him before. You used our farm as a dumping ground for your unwanted daughter, and then you used our trust to help you commit tax fraud. Eleanor and I have been unknowing accomplices to child abandonment and financial crimes. Dad, please, my father began, but Grandpa cut him off with a gesture. Do not call me Dad. A father protects his children. A father does not systematically destroy one child to benefit another. You are no son of mine. The formal disownment sent shockwaves through the room. My grandmother, who had driven down from Montana specifically for Madison's graduation, was crying silently as she watched her family implode. But when she spoke, her voice was steady and determined. Sophia, honey, your grandfather, and I want you to know that we never wanted to participate in your isolation. We believed what your parents told us about your behavioral problems, and we thought we were helping. But we have been keeping records, and we will testify on your behalf in any legal proceedings. This was more support than I had dared to hope for. Having my grandparents publicly acknowledge the lies and offer to serve as witnesses gave my case the kind of family credibility that would be difficult for my parents to challenge. But it was Madison's next words that delivered the most devastating blow to our parents' remaining defenses. I want to see every document, every bank record, every piece of communication about this theft. Her voice was stronger now, powered by righteous anger rather than shock. And I want to know exactly how much of my life has been built on money stolen from my sister. Madison, sweetie, you are not responsible for our decisions, my mother pleaded. We never wanted you to know about the financial arrangements because we did not want you to feel guilty. Guilty? Madison's laugh was bitter and humorless. You think I feel guilty? I feel contaminated. Everything I have achieved, everything I thought I earned through my own merit, is tainted by theft. My college degree, my graduate school, my apartment, probably half my wardrobe, all of it paid for with money stolen from Sophia. She turned to me with tears in her eyes. How can you even stand to look at me? How can you not hate me for benefiting from what they did to you? This was the moment I had been preparing for since I learned the truth. Madison was not my enemy. She was another victim of our parents' manipulation. Mad, you were 12 years old when this started. You believed what they told you because children believe their parents. You are not responsible for their choices. But I benefited from their choices. I built my entire identity around being the successful daughter, the one who made good choices, the one who did not cause family drama. Meanwhile, you were alone on a farm, working multiple jobs to survive, believing your family did not want you. David squeezed her hand and spoke for the first time since the confrontation began. Madison, Sophia is right. You were a child. But what matters now is what you choose to do with the truth. Madison wiped her eyes and looked directly at our parents. I choose to stand with my sister. Whatever legal action she takes, whatever consequences you face, I will not be defending you. And I will not be accepting any more financial support from you ever. Madison, please, my father said desperately. We can work through this as a family. We can make payments to Sophia. We can restructure things so everyone is taken care of. We stopped being a family the day you shipped Sophia off like unwanted baggage, Madison replied coldly. And we definitely stopped being a family when you built my success on theft from my sister. The restaurant manager returned, this time with the clear intention of asking us to leave. The other diners had complained about the disruption, and our family drama was affecting their business. My father, probably grateful for any excuse to escape the confrontation, began gathering his things and suggesting we continue the conversation at home. There will be no conversation at home, I said firmly. There will be legal proceedings, financial restitution, and public accountability. But there will be no family discussions about this. You forfeited the right to family discussions when you chose to be criminals instead of parents. I handed my father a business card for my attorney. Amanda Rivera will be in contact with you tomorrow morning to begin the process of recovering my stolen funds. I suggest you hire legal representation immediately because the federal charges for tax evasion and identity theft are going to require more expertise than you have. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, my extended family was already choosing sides. My grandparents, Aunt Rachel, and Uncle Mike made it clear they would be supporting me and cutting contact with my parents until the situation was resolved. Other relatives seemed uncertain, probably hoping they could maintain neutrality in what was obviously going to be a protracted legal battle. Madison hugged me tightly before we parted ways in the parking lot. I am so sorry, Sophia. I am sorry for believing their lies. I am sorry for not questioning why you were never around. And I am sorry for living the life that should have been yours. You lived the life they gave you, I replied. Now we both get to build the lives we choose. 6 months after that catastrophic graduation dinner, I sat in Amanda Rivera's law office reviewing the final settlement documents. The numbers on the page represented more than just financial restitution. They represented 13 years of stolen opportunities, manipulated relationships, and systematic erasure finally being acknowledged and corrected. My parents had been forced to liquidate significant assets to repay the $132,000 they had stolen from me, plus interest and legal fees that brought the total to nearly $200,000. The federal tax evasion charges had resulted in substantial fines and probation, while the identity theft charges had destroyed my father's professional reputation and ended his business partnership with Robert Kim. But the money, satisfying as it was to recover, turned out to be the least important part of my victory. The most meaningful outcome was the relationship I had rebuilt with Madison. She had moved out of the stolen condo within a week of learning the truth and had taken a job as a research assistant to support herself independently. We met for coffee every Sunday morning, slowly building the sisterly relationship that our parents' lies had prevented us from having. "I keep thinking about all the times I wondered why you never called," Madison told me during one of our weekly meetings. "I used to make up stories about why my big sister did not want to be part of my life. I thought maybe I had done something wrong, or maybe you just did not like me." "I thought the same thing in reverse," I admitted. "I thought you had chosen them over me, that you preferred being an only child to having a complicated sister around." We had both been victims of our parents' manipulation, just in different ways. Madison was dealing with the psychological impact of learning that her entire identity had been built on lies and theft. I was dealing with the complex emotions of finally having my experiences validated after years of being gaslit and isolated. The extended family relationships had sorted themselves out in predictable ways. My grandparents had become fierce advocates for both Madison and me, publicly acknowledging their role in enabling my parents' abuse and making substantial changes to their will to ensure that the farm would pass to Madison and me equally. Aunt Rachel had organized a family meeting to address how everyone had been complicit in accepting my parents' lies without questioning them. Some relatives had chosen to maintain relationships with my parents, either because they genuinely believed in forgiveness and second chances, or because accepting the truth would require them to acknowledge their own failures. I had made peace with these losses. Blood relationships that could only be maintained by ignoring criminal behavior were not relationships worth preserving. More importantly, I had built the chosen family that Amanda had helped me envision during our early legal consultations. My support network now included David, who had become like the brother I never had, Robert Kim, who had become a mentor and business advisor, Marcus Chin, who had become a trusted friend, and a growing circle of colleagues and friends who knew my real story and valued my character independently of my family drama. The professional vindication had been almost as satisfying as the personal vindication. Word of my parents' crimes had spread through their social and business networks, destroying the reputation they had built partly by sacrificing me. My father's accounting clients had fled when the tax fraud became public knowledge. My mother's volunteer organizations had quietly asked her to step down from leadership roles. Meanwhile, my own business had thrived. The skills I had developed in investigating my parents' crimes had translated into a specialty in crisis communications and reputation management. Companies facing scandals sought out my expertise in managing public perception and rebuilding trust after betrayals. It was ironic that my parents' betrayal had given me a competitive advantage in helping others recover from similar situations. But perhaps the most unexpected outcome was the relationship I had developed with my grandparents. Freed from my parents' interference and manipulation, Grandma Eleanor and Grandpa Joe had revealed themselves to be the loving, supportive family members they had always wanted to be. They had invited me to spend Christmas on the farm for the first time since I was 18, and they were planning to split their time between Montana and Seattle so they could be more involved in Madison's life and mine. "We lost 13 years with you because we trusted the wrong people," Grandpa Joe had told me during my last visit to the farm. "We will not make that mistake again. Family loyalty should never require you to ignore criminal behavior or accept abuse." The legal proceedings had also opened doors I had never expected. Amanda had connected me with other attorneys who specialized in family fraud cases, and I had become an informal advocate for adult children dealing with similar situations. Parental financial abuse was more common than most people realized, and my case had provided a roadmap for others seeking justice and recovery. I had testified before a state legislative committee about the need for stronger protections for adult children whose parents controlled their financial information and inheritance rights. The experience of speaking publicly about my experience had been terrifying and empowering simultaneously. My parents had made one final attempt at reconciliation through Aunt Rachel, proposing family therapy and promising to make additional amends beyond the legal settlement. I had declined without hesitation. Some betrayals are too comprehensive and calculating to be resolved through therapy and promises. They had 13 years to make different choices, I told Aunt Rachel. They chose to double down on lies and theft at every opportunity. I am not interested in giving them more opportunities to manipulate and harm me. Madison had initially struggled with my decision to maintain no contact with our parents, hoping that we could somehow rebuild as a family once the legal issues were resolved. But therapy had helped her understand that forgiveness did not require ongoing relationship, and that protecting ourselves from future harm was more important than maintaining the appearance of family unity. As I signed the final legal documents that officially closed my case against my parents, I reflected on the unexpected gifts that had emerged from one of the most painful experiences of my life. I had learned that I was stronger than I had ever imagined, that chosen family could be more loyal than blood family, and that truth really could triumph over elaborate lies if you were patient and strategic enough to let it unfold properly. The 15-year-old girl who had been abandoned on a Montana farm had become a 28-year-old woman who had successfully taken down the people who tried to erase her. But more importantly, she had built a life worth living, surrounded by people who valued her for exactly who she was. Sometimes the best revenge is not just success, but the kind of authentic, meaningful success that proves your worth independently of the people who tried to diminish you. I had learned to thrive not despite my abandonment, but because surviving it had taught me what genuine love and loyalty actually looked like. You know, sharing this story with all of you has been incredible, and seeing the comments pour in from people who have experienced similar family betrayals reminds me that we are never as alone as we feel. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own well-being? Have you ever discovered that the people you trusted most were the ones causing you the most harm? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below because there is power in knowing we are not the only ones who have faced impossible choices between truth and family peace. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about justice, karma, and the complicated dynamics of family relationships. And definitely share this with anyone who needs to hear that it is possible to reclaim your power from people who tried to steal it. Thank you for listening to my journey from abandoned daughter to empowered woman. And remember that sometimes the family that matters most is the one you choose for yourself, not the one you were born into.